The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the murmurs of 100 alien delegations. Towering insected diplomats clacked their mandibles in irritation, while gelatinous entities pulsed with changing shades of discomfort. The air held the aroma of a dozen different atmospheres, each filtered through translation systems that made contact possible among species who, in any other scenario, would have nothing to do with one another. At the midst of it all stood a lone person, Commander Elliot Rohr, clothed in the dark blue uniform of Earth's military command. He stood motionless, his hands resting behind his back, boots planted firmly, shoulders squared. His expression was unreadable, the tiniest smirk pulling at the corner of his lips, as if this entire gathering amused him. The Zari diplomat, a towering Aven-like creature dressed in ceremonial robes, folded his 6 dazzling wings against his back. He adjusted the golden sigil of the council around his neck and headed toward Rohr. "We have been more than patient," Avari declared, his voice smooth yet loaded with calm menace. "The council has offered an integration, a generous one. Your people will be offered a seat, conditional upon your full conformity with the council's governance." Rohr said nothing. The diplomat maintained his tone, sharpening it. "This is not a request, human. It is the natural order. Your species has been allowed to expand unfettered for far too long. Your advancements, your violence, undermine the delicate stability we have sustained for millennia. Earth will relinquish its independent military forces. You will share your technologies for the benefit of the greater whole. This is the Council's final offer." The chamber collapsed into silence. Every eye turned to the human, expecting compliance, submission, perhaps a plea for negotiation. Rohr breathed a slow, measured breath, then smiled. "No." The word cut through the chamber like a blade. A wave of disbelief spread through the gathered representatives. Some exchanged glances, others whispered among themselves in their native tongues. The Zari diplomat's wings twitched. "You cannot be serious," he stated, his voice tinged with incredulity. Rohr chuckled. "Oh, I'm dead serious. Earth isn't interested in your terms. We don't recognize your authority over us." He paused, his voice hardening. "And we sure as hell aren't about to hand over all we've built just because a bunch of bureaucrats decided we should." A reptilian delegate slammed a clawed fist against the table. "Do you comprehend the effects of this defiance? The Council does not tolerate rebellion. We bring order to the stars." Rohr chuckled again, shaking his head. "You mean control. You sit here in this grand hall making judgments for worlds you've never set foot on. You want us to kneel, to discard everything that makes us who we are, only so we fit into your vision of peace?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice falling into something colder. "That's not going to happen." The Zari narrowed his violet eyes. "You believe you can stand against us? The Council controls the most advanced fleets in the galaxy. We could reduce your planet to silence with a single edict." Rohr held his gaze. "Then do it." Quiet. The challenge hung in the air, smothering the room. "If you could have wiped us out, you would have already," Rohr continued. "But you didn't. Because deep down, you know the truth. You can't afford a fight with humanity. You came here today assuming we'd be too frightened to refuse, that we'd bend the knee because it was the logical thing to do. You assume we're like you." He let the words settle before taking a step forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "We aren't." The chamber erupted into turmoil. Several representatives demanded immediate military action, others advocated moderation. A few, the oldest and wisest among them, stayed silent, absorbed in thought. A Kaler strategist, her feline features tight with calculation, lifted a clawed hand. "Your resistance is illogical. You cannot triumph against us." Rohr tilted his head. "You sure about that?" She paused, and he smirked. "See, that's the problem. You think victory is guaranteed just because you've been on top for so long. You've never encountered an opponent like us. You call us violent, unpredictable, dangerous, but you've never inquired why." He folded his arms. "We didn't become this way by accident. We learned. We adapted. We evolved in a world that sought to destroy us at every turn. And now, here we are. The Zari's wings expanded wide. "This is lunacy." Roar shook his head. "No, this is humanity." He turned on his heel and started toward the exit, his bodyguards following unflinching. "You walk away from this chamber and you seal your fate," the Zari called after him. "There will be no more discussions." Roar halted at the threshold, peeking over his shoulder. "Good." And with that, he was gone. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council sat in stunned stillness. Panic spread like wildfire. Humanity hadn't just refused diplomacy. They had abandoned the fundamental foundation of galactic order. No species had ever dared to stand against the Council's authority so openly. The chamber, once a place of silent pondering, now boiled over with tension. The Zari diplomat, who had given the ultimatum, stood motionless. His expression was inscrutable, yet the way his wings jerked showed his unease. Meetings stretched deep into the cycles. The Council's military strategists, warlords, and economic advisors assembled in emergency sessions, debating their response. Negotiation was eliminated almost immediately. Humanity had made their views plain. They would not submit. That left only one path of action. The Council's military officers insisted Earth must be made an example, a demonstration of overwhelming might to crush their defiance before other species got any ideas. Lord General Carrick, the Zari admiral in charge of fleet coordination, stood before the assembled high command. "Humanity believes they are untouchable," Carrick said, his talons clicking against the floor. "They believe their resistance is significant. However, we are the Council. Our fleets span countless worlds. Our technology has dominated every species that has challenged us. If they refuse to submit, we will bring them to their knees." The decision was made. The war had begun. Abandoned, bereft of civilian life, the streets were hauntingly vacant. Electricity grids remained functioning, but without movement, it was as if Earth had been evacuated. Troop leaders transmitted their bewilderment back to orbit. Carrick listened as reports came in from across the planet. Opposition was nowhere to be seen. There were no military convoys, no planes, no heavy fortifications. It didn't add up. Humanity had refused to submit. They had invited the Council to attack, yet they weren't even fighting back. But deep beneath the surface, away from prying sensors, the actual struggle had already begun. Humanity had never intended to fight a traditional war. The Galactic Council had misjudged them in one key way. They assumed that the absence of immediate opposition meant weakness. In reality, it meant that the conflict had already shifted into a battlefield the Council was not prepared for. Every Council dropship, every troop transport, the entire supply chain was now operating inside enemy territory without even realizing it. The humans had arranged for this. They had prepared their cities, weaponized their infrastructure, and turned their planet into the worst battlefield imaginable. Then, without warning, the first Council dropship burst midair. No visible projectile, no energy beam, only a quick and catastrophic detonation. Then another. And another. The Council's forces, stretched thin across Earth's surface, abruptly found themselves under siege. The original assumption was sabotage, perhaps concealed bombs planted in their own ships. But as reports streamed in, a terrifying fact became evident. Humanity had turned their own atmosphere into a weapon. High-energy pulses, undetectable to the naked eye, were causing explosive reactions within the enemy's power cores. Dropships were detonating in sequence, their reactors destabilized by precision attacks that weren't coming from any traditional weapon in orbit. The fleet raced to examine the situation. Then something even worse happened. Every Council battleship in low orbit suffered simultaneous system failures. Communications were wiped out. Shields flashed and died. Targeting systems failed. The huge battleships, once positioned to deliver devastation, now drifted helplessly as their own reactors began to destabilize. And then the truth was uncovered. Humanity had never planned to fight in open warfare. They had let the Council land, let them believe the war was already won. But now, as whole battalions vanished without a trace, as entire warships were shut down without a single shot being fired, it became obvious. This was not an invasion. This was an execution. The Council had walked into the ultimate trap. Panic erupted among the Council forces. Their invasion fleet, once an unstoppable armada, had turned into a battlefield of chaos. Warships, once the pinnacle of galactic military dominance, now faded, powerless in Earth's orbit. Dropships that had landed found themselves stranded, cut off, alone. The Council had always relied on superior numbers, advanced technology, and organized coordination. Now, every advantage had been stripped away. Admiral Carrick barked orders to his bridge crew, demanding a status report, but the fleet's communication systems were in chaos. Blocked signals blanketed frequencies. The humans had unleashed a kind of electronic warfare the Council had never encountered before. This wasn't simple signal interference.